Daily Tax Minute. This is Tony Novak here to share a few points on how to stay out of tax trouble. Let's jump right in. Today is Sunday evening, where the business tax season ended Friday, uh, March 15th, and a lot of us who handle business taxes for clients worked into the evening to get things done. I was fortunate to wrap up a little before 6, and that's better than average. However, it was a much tougher than usual tax season, business tax season. And so I didn't didn't do Daily Tax Minute over the weekend and took some time to think about that and have a couple of thoughts to share. One is that there are an enormous number of business entities. By business entities, I mean partnerships, LLCs operating as corporations, S corporations, um, some entity that needs a business tax filing that really has very little purpose for existing. At a minimum, the downside of having a business entity is that your tax accounting work and costs are going to be doubled. That's a minimum. Um, I see very little upside in the purpose of at least a half a dozen of the tax returns that I did for business entities. We really have to question as to whether these entities should exist. And frankly, I'm probably not helping by giving my clients reduced rates because they've been with me for so long or some other reason. That was one thing. The second thing is that I noticed for first time filing of a business entity, I personally greatly underestimated the time it takes to get those tax reports together. The reason is that in many cases, and I deal with particularly smaller ones, smaller organizations, and often one person, uh, one decision maker, has not dealt with all of the accounting questions that need to be dealt with. Uh, how are you going to account for inventory? How are you going to handle depreciation? What's your policy in adjusting for cash imbalances? In other words, your bank deposits says one thing and your sales say something different. So we need to reconcile all of these things to do a tax return. The third thing I notice, just in general, I'm not sure what to do going forward, is that sole operators, that is, a person that's one owner, one shareholder, one member LLCs that wants to handle their own books. It's logical. They know their business better than anyone else. They may not have the cash flow to hire someone else to do their books, but I notice much higher level of screw ups among those organizations, and to the point where we have to reach a reasonable basis to report on a tax return. And if I can't do that, I can't sign off on it. And you shouldn't be signing off if you don't have faith in your numbers either. So at a minimum, I'm telling people, just take a step back. If your bookkeeping system is goofy and not working for you, think about the basics. Number one, you want to report what was your gross income? How much money did you bring in? For many of us, that's just a simple matter of adding the deposits on 12 bank statements. If you take cash, that's a different story. And if you're doing transfers between accounts, that needs to be accounted for. But basically, that's it. What came into the bank account? If you can't do that, or you have trouble doing that, we're in trouble right off the bat. Second, I already mentioned the adjustments to that, for whatever reasons, whether they're refunds, returns, transfers, debt payments, loan money. We make an adjustment so that we arrive at a gross income. And then the second part's pretty straightforward. You just need a reasonable basis to know your expenses. Again, whether it's bank records or whether you use QuickBooks or something else, it doesn't need to be complicated, but it needs to be reasonable. It doesn't need to be precise down to the penny, but it needs to be reasonable. And if you can't do that, we ought to be rethinking the system from scratch. And honestly, I just think that there's too many business operators that should not be doing their own books. They ought to hire someone, even into it as much as I'm not endorsing them. I think they offer it at $200 a month, and if that's too much, well then we have to really question the legitimacy and whether the business ought to be operating as an entity in the first place. All right, that's all I have today. Would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. I'll be back tomorrow with another Tax Minute.